Star Trek Discovery's Burnham switch was a bigger risk than the TOS retcons or the 900-year time jump. When Star Trek Discovery premiered in 2017, it was immediately clear that CBS was taking the franchise somewhere bold, new, and controversial. Among the many narrative gambles, one in particular stood out as both audacious and polarizing: Michael Burnham's central role in the story. Dubbed the Burnham switch by fans and critics alike, the decision to center a Star Trek series around a single, morally complex protagonist who was not only new to the franchise, but also directly responsible for catastrophic events, proved to be one of the franchise's most daring moves, arguably even riskier than the infamous retcons of the original series or the jarring 900-year jump to the era of Star Trek Discovery Season 3. To understand why Burnham's introduction represented such a seismic shift, consider the history of Star Trek's lead characters. The franchise had always revolved around ensembles, with charismatic leaders such as Kirk, Picard, or Sisko anchoring the narrative, while allowing room for their crew to shine. Even Captain Janeway, while undeniably central to Voyager, still relied heavily on her ship's diverse personalities to carry the plot. Michael Burnham, in contrast, was introduced not just as a new lead, but as a narrative engine whose actions, and often questionable decisions, drove the story forward. From her first moments on screen, she was positioned as the key pivot of Star Trek lore, a human raised by Vulcans, a mutineer, and a catalyst for interstellar war. The series effectively asked viewers to invest in a character whose moral clarity was intentionally murky. This is where the risk skyrockets. The TOS retcons, which attempted to align certain plot points with pre-existing Star Trek canon, were tricky but ultimately conservative. They reshaped context without completely dismantling the audience's understanding of the universe. Similarly, the 900-year jump in Discovery's third season was a narrative leap that strained continuity, but it occurred after the audience had already invested in Burnham's character. In contrast, the Burnham switch required immediate trust. Viewers had to accept a Star Trek hero who simultaneously subverted the franchise's moral expectations. She was fallible, even culpable, yet undeniably compelling. That's a gamble no Star Trek showrunner had ever attempted before. Burnham's role also redefined Star Trek's traditional narrative structure. Classic Star Trek relied on episodic storytelling, where moral and philosophical dilemmas were explored through self-contained adventures. By centering the story on Burnham's personal arc, Discovery merged serialized storytelling with Star Trek's ethos, creating a high-stakes narrative web. Every misstep Burnham made rippled across the galaxy, challenging fans accustomed to Kirk or Picard resolving crises with a combination of intellect, diplomacy, and gravitas. In short, the Burnham switch wasn't just a character decision, it was a structural one, reshaping the DNA of Star Trek for the streaming era. The risk extended beyond narrative mechanics to cultural perception. Star Trek has long been a platform for exploring social issues, but it had historically done so through allegory and ensemble perspectives. Burnham's story demanded that audiences confront moral ambiguity on a very personal level. She was a hero, a villain, and a victim all at once. This blurred the lines between right and wrong in ways that traditional Trek had never attempted. For fans devoted to the clear-cut morality of TOS or the ethical steadiness of TNG, this was a shocking pivot. It could have alienated longtime viewers while simultaneously attracting a new, younger audience accustomed to morally complex leads. The gamble paid off, but not without friction. Critics and fans were divided, often fiercely, about Burnham's role. Some celebrated the show's willingness to innovate, praising its layered protagonist and serialized storytelling. Others decried the shift, arguing that Star Trek was losing its moral compass, sacrificing the franchise's philosophical core for character-driven drama. Either way, the Burnham switch succeeded in shaking the Star Trek universe to its foundations, forcing a reassessment of what a Star Trek hero could and should be. Ultimately, the Burnham switch was a risk because it demanded that the audience do more than accept a new character. It demanded that they redefine their understanding of Star Trek itself. The TOS retcons tinkered with history, and the 900-year Burnham switch succeeded in shaking the Star Trek universe to its foundations, forcing a reassessment of what a Star Trek hero could and should be. Ultimately, the Burnham switch was a risk because it demanded that the audience do more than accept a new character. It demanded that they redefine their understanding of Star Trek itself. The TOS retcons tinkered with history, and the 900-year